Praise be Jesus Christ. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 says there's an appointed time for everything. A time to be silent and a time to speak. And Bishop Barron has broken his silence on the sexual abuse crisis. He's written a book called Letter to a Suffering Church. A bishop speaks on the sexual abuse crisis. And the announcement about this new book was made May 13th on the Word on Fire show hosted by Brandon Vaught. And the show is called, if you go on YouTube, it's called Bishop Barron's New Book on the Sexual Abuse Crisis. And I encourage you to listen to the whole thing. It's about 33 minutes long. I took some notes when I was listening to it, so I'm just going to highlight some of the key points that I wrote down. But again, listen to the whole thing. Bishop Barron says his book, which you can pre-order. I pre-ordered it. I hope it arrives soon. I got an email saying it's going to arrive in July. I hope it arrives sooner than that. But you can go to the Word on Fire website for information on getting the book. He highlights the Gallup poll, the Gallup survey. 37% of American Catholics have considered leaving the church because of the scandal. And that's why obviously something needs to be done. This needs to be addressed. Okay, he says there's 5 chapters in the book. I just want to highlight some of the notes I made as Bishop Barron was describing these 5 chapters. The first chapter is called The Devil's Masterpiece. And he highlights how this is very much a spiritual reality. There's a spiritual war going on. The second chapter is called Light from Scripture. And I'm probably looking forward to this chapter most. He gives the example of the high priest Eli, who had 2 sons who were taking over the ministry, but these 2 sons were involved in sexual abuse and financial abuse, and Eli was warned about them many times. And Eli tried to get them to smarten up, but they didn't listen to their father. And Eli, he didn't deal with it. He let it go on, and it led to the ruin of Israel. And Bishop Barron says, quote, "That story should sound pretty familiar to us. In the last 25 years, bad priests abusing their people, complaints brought forward to authority figures who say nice things but don't do very much. The result, disaster for the new Israel that we call the church," unquote. The third chapter is called We Have Been Here Before. Again, I'm really looking forward to this chapter as well. Bishop Barron says he speaks about Saint Peter Damian. And we're all familiar with some of what Saint Peter Damian had to say about the situation of the clergy in his time. Bishop Barron says, quote, "Peter Damian is famous for raising his very eloquent and strong voice against precisely sexual corruption in the church and on the part of high church leaders who were taking advantage of seminarians and young priests. And again, talk about a distant mirror. You say the McCarrick crisis of last summer. Look back over 1,000 years in history. You'll see a distant mirror of the same thing," unquote. The 4th chapter is called Why Should We Stay? Again, a very important chapter. And then the 5th chapter is called The Way Forward. Bishop Barron says, quote, "Who can deny, and this is not a blanket condemnation, the vast majority of priests are good and decent men," and so on, "but that there was some kind of rot in the priesthood that allowed this abuse to happen. And you can look at that at a number of levels, both the abuse itself, but also the kind of overlooking of the abuse, or looking the other way, not taking it with sufficient seriousness. What was it in far too many priests and bishops that kind of allowed this thing to unfold," unquote. And then Bishop Barron in the interview with Brandon ends by saying, quote, "In our video last summer of Lincoln, who is a great hero of mine, where there were many people at the time of the Civil War, especially when the war got really dicey, and people were dying in the tens of thousands, who were saying, 'Oh, come on, let's just get out of this thing. Let's just end this goofy war and let the South have their way. Let's just end the fight. And Lincoln's genius was to, despite all that opposition, despite the terrible quality of the struggle, to say, no, we have to hang in there and fight. Because he saw the institution of slavery as a fundamental undermining of the very nature of American democracy. In a way that this rot that's in the church is undermining what we're supposed to be. All right, fight it. Stay. Redouble efforts. It's not the time to leave, but to stay and fight. That would be my last word to Catholics, unquote. Bishop Barron, thank you very much for addressing this issue. We do want to fight, and we're looking for bishops who will lead the way. Viva Cristo Rey.